After 2 decades of being an athlete that's gone to the Olympics, you get used to being scrutinized, doing something you feel is worth doing in the spotlight. And so then those are all factors that you begin to weigh every choice against. I still constantly struggle with that kind of shadow. Who am I and what do I want the world to actually see and project back to me?
That's Sasha Cohen, the world champion figure skater and Olympic medalist. And this is Make Yourself at Home, the podcast that takes you into the homes of people you admire to show you a side you don't usually get to see. I'm Kristen Twyford, and every week we'll talk to someone at the top of their career to explore holistic success and how work and home are inextricably intertwined. Along the way, we hope to inspire you to live well, whatever that means to you. Make Yourself at Home is presented by Nines, the household management app designed to help you manage your home and everything that comes with it, so you can live with ease. Today, we're in Sasha Cohen's home in Colorado, talking about reframing how she thinks about happiness after 20 years of striving for achievement, her search for meaning post-competition, and how her time figure skating shaped the person she is today. Sasha went to 2 Olympic Games in 2002 and 2006. She went to Torino as the favorite and went home with a silver medal. But she says, win or lose, the moment passes, and you're left asking yourself, who are you now? She says she's still working through that question, but for starters, she's a Columbia University grad with a passion for investing and entrepreneurship, a mom with 2 young kids, and a philosopher reflecting on her experiences and building a new way of living. Make Yourself at Home with Sasha Cohen. Sasha, thank you so much for having us into your home. I'm so excited to talk with you.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be on the podcast today.
To start out, I want to hear, what does home mean to you?
Home is really, for me, where you find this sense of comfort, and there's a feeling that you get. And I've moved so much over the course of my life, over the pandemic, that it's really a few items that I bring with me and the people that are there that make me feel like I'm at home. And some of the things are Buddha statues from my travels, like a favorite blanket, certain pictures. And when I put those up, it just makes me feel like, this is where I belong, this is where I come home to. And of course, a favorite teacup and my tea collection. I would be remiss if I did not mention those.
Yes, just some things about that little simple pleasure that feels so homey and comforting. And you've moved around so much, even from the time that you were a little kid, right? Are there still things that you took from home to home with you when you were little that you have in your home now?
I have a few things. One of those, namely, is a birth certificate, which is important to have.
That's crucial.
For reasons. But I've more or less been a shedder of possessions, and I don't take a lot with me. My skating memorabilia is largely with my mom. She has my medals and my Olympic rings and all my skating dresses that I wore since I was 7 years old competing, and my Olympic skates. So kind of the important token items we kept. And what I have with me now is, I think, the memories I've created in chapter 2 and my life when I moved to New York, had my first apartment by myself, and now having kids, all their stuff. And it's a very different chapter than my skating days.
Mm-hmm. Well, I want to talk about both those chapters today and sort of your transition from one to the other and sort of how you've changed over time. And so you're known for this incredible skating career, 6-time medalist at the U.S. Championships with a gold medal in 2006, 3-time medalist at the World Championships. You went to the Olympics in 2002 and 2006, and you had an incredible silver medal performance in Torino in 2006. I think everybody listening to this probably remembers watching that. I know I do. And I'd love to know what's something that might surprise people about you. If they know all of that, what's something that they don't know?
I think something that I haven't been as vocal about is really this spirituality search, this search for meaning post-competition. And I think as a kid, my life was much simpler, and I was training to hopefully have a spot one day on Team USA at the Olympic Games. And so I knew what I got up to do and what my purpose was. And my community was really sports based. It was really the figure skating community, it was Team USA, later the Olympic community, and my close friends and family that supported me. And then once I retired, all of that structure and familiarity faded away. And I wasn't training for the next Olympics. I was not going to the ice rink every day. I lived in a new city. It was pursuing new goals. I could no longer do a triple jump in my sleep, basically. And so all these things that defined me and gave me structure were no longer part of my day-to-day existence. And it was scary but exciting to have a chance to peel back that onion layer and see who else am I if I'm not a skater, if I'm not a competitive athlete. So it gave me this opportunity to ask a lot of questions, which was amazing, but also unsettling, maybe slightly terrifying when you feel like you have no identity and you don't know what your purpose is anymore, and you're building a new community, a community outside of the world of sports. And so first of all, you feel like, okay, everyone spent the last 20 years focusing on their education and their interests that they were going to develop into a career over the next 50 years. And I put all that energy into my athletic career, which was amazing. But then, when that chapter ended, you're kind of starting from scratch. And so I guess that's a long way of coming back to this need for spirituality. And I grew up in a house that was not at all religious, not particularly spiritual. And I began to travel quite a bit to Southeast Asia. And I went to Myanmar and I went to Thailand. And I went to China, I went to Japan, South Korea, India. And I just really fell in love with the Buddhist philosophy and this kind of constant self-examination and searching for peace amidst the chaos and reframing our relationship with success, reframing our relationship with achievement, with status, with being seen. And I competed in the days when social media had when I retired, basically social media was just taking off. So when I was competing, I wasn't tweeting. I didn't have an Instagram. I think I maybe had Facebook. And so it's a very different reality today for athletes, for celebrities to feel like if they didn't post it, it didn't happen and it didn't matter. And they're not building a brand and they're not staying current and they're out of, if you're not top of mind, then you're not doing something right. And so I think outside of sports, I've felt these social media pressures really just grow in the last few decades at the same time as I've moved further and further away from my athletic identity. And so this curiosity around spirituality and this bigger question of the human existence and where do we find meaning has become particularly interesting to me. And I'm by no means an expert. It's just, it's a place that I think that there's a lot of material, a lot of place to do self-work, and where I'd love to spend more time with community.
Well, I want to dig into all of what you just said, and I think especially starting with reframing success. And to do that, I want to start way back at the beginning. You mentioned that you started skating competitively when you were 7. Was there a moment when you set your sight on the Olympics where it went from something that you did for fun to being something that was a little bit more serious? Can you remember a moment?
At the age of, almost 7 when I started, I just fell in love with this feeling of gliding and speed across the ice. It was absolutely magical to me because I was a little adventurer. I loved thrills. I loved jumping on rooftops, which is something that I'm dealing with right now with my son, which I'm like, you can't climb on the roof. But apple doesn't fall far from the tree. And then I think as soon as I realized that, okay, skating isn't just this chance to feel the wind in my hair and this speed and this sense of freedom, but it's also this this avenue to learn new skills and to compete and to choreograph programs. And there's so much more than just gliding around the ice rink. And so every year that I stayed in the sport, from 7 to 8, 8 to 9, I think around that age, I started to realize there's an Olympic Games. I watched Kristi Yamaguchi compete. I watched Oksana Bayul and Nancy Kerrigan and then Tara Lipinski. And I saw these amazing female athletes. And, watching them at the Olympic Games is the culmination of decades-long journey for them and all the work that they've put in. And I'm like, I want to do that one day. I want to be there. I want to go to the Olympics. I want to march in the stadium for opening ceremony with the U.S. flag and all gear and have that feeling. So I'd say around the age of like 9 or 10, that became a concrete goal. And then when I was 12, I told my mom that I was absolutely going to be homeschooled so that I could spend the day at the rink.
And for a 12-year-old to have that kind of vision and that kind of just decision making, like you knew that's what you wanted. I think that's incredible that you were so sure at such a young age. And I can imagine, you started being homeschooled and it changed every aspect of your life. Did you know what you were getting into and you just felt so sure? Or do you think, oh, wow, this was different from what I expected?
It's funny because I think at this point in my life, I have had a lot more experiences and perhaps have become a little bit more pragmatic, maybe cynical. It depends on the term you want to choose. But I'm just aware of everything I don't know and aware of the chances of succeeding in a sport like figure skating. And, I think sometimes ignorance is bliss. And I look back at that clarity I had in childhood, and it's just what I wanted to do and I needed to do. And it was as simple as that. And I think it's so beautiful to think that there was a time in my life with such simplicity, because now there's a list of pros and cons that are a few pages long for every consideration. And at the age of 12, I was like, I love this. I wake up and this is what I need to do, what I want to do. It's so beautiful because I'm not even considering doing something else. There's just clarity. And so I miss that type of clarity and decisiveness. And of course, I wasn't thinking like, oh, well, if I think about how many girls are skating and how many girls go to the Olympics every 4 years, like statistically, what are my chances of going? And does it make sense to spend the next 10 years of my life pursuing this path versus that path? And that never considered to me. And I think just having that kind of passion and the need to do something is rare. And if you ever find it, if you're at that crossroads in life, I think you seize it, you take it. And then that's the case. And that's what the situation was for me when I was, a kid, early teen, and making that decision.
Yeah. And back then, could you see past that one goal? Did you ever think about what you wanted your life to look like more holistically, even beyond skating? Or were you just laser focused on, I'm going to make it to the Olympics?
I think it was pretty laser focused. Things were short term in terms of how I planned. And it was like, okay, I want to land this jump in the next month. Or then it was like, I need to make it to nationals, or I need to win this competition. I didn't really think, when I'm 35 years old, like, what will my life look like? And am I developing the right skills for this certain career progression?
Yeah.
So I now very much think about those things all the time. Yeah. Too much so to a fault. But I think it's a mix of just a child's enthusiasm and a sense of purpose and fit. Mm-hmm. At the time, I looked a few years younger than everyone else my age. I think I hit puberty like 8 years later than most people. And so I didn't really fit in school. I didn't have the same interests. And when I found skating, I was like, wow, this is a vehicle for me. Like, I want to learn this spin. I want to get better every single day. If I'm not on the ice physically working on these skills, I want to be watching the figure skating greats and learning from them, or watching videos of my practice today so I can kind of see what I feel and make adjustments to get to that next level. And that's really the way that my life progressed from age, 8 or 9 to 21. And every year, I just focused on nationals and the world, and then these Olympic cycles in 4 years, and the coach that I needed, the choreographer I needed, where my weaknesses were, how to stay healthy, how to be a stronger athlete. And that was the nature of my life until I hit 21, and that was after my second Olympics. And that was the first time I really took a step away from the sport and pursued all these amazing opportunities that came to me from the sport, like guest starring on Las Vegas and CSI New York and a couple little indie films, going to the Vanity Fair, Oscar party, kind of these magical little moments, stepping into a much bigger, glamorous world. And then 2 years later, I decided, you know what? I still have something in me to prove, to explore. And I decided to come back for a third Olympic Games, which I ultimately ended up being a alternate for. It was a very tough year training with injuries and, at the age of 24, 25 and competing against 15-year-olds, your body's in a very, very different place and your mind as well. But I wouldn't give that up for the world. I'm so glad that I explored that. And even though it didn't go as I had hoped, you constantly learn about yourself when you push yourself to the precipice. When you're uncomfortable, when it's a little scary, when it's not easy, that's when you're really learning. And so I've gone back and forth in my life in periods that are just nice and easy and there's no pushing. And it's very pleasant for a short time, but then you kind of feel flat and you miss these highs, you miss these lows. And ultimately, I think it brings certain personalities like mine kind of back to this very uncomfortable edge in life where you kind of test yourself and see if it's going to be great or if it's going to be terrible, but you need to test it out yourself.
What do you think that third trip to the Olympics gave you in terms of, just a sense of accomplishment or closure that maybe the first two didn't?
Yeah, well, so I was an alternate. So I went to the national championships in 2010. It was fourth place. And, it was so good to be back competing at the nationals and to get a standing ovation and to have so many people excited that had supported me for the last decade of my career to be there and be happy to see me again. So it was like this bittersweet homecoming, right, where people were so excited and proud that I'd come back for this third trial. And at the same time, there was like a sadness that I didn't make the team and a sadness that, a chapter had been closed and it was finished. And now I'd be moving on to this post-competitive part of my life, post-figure skating. And I think that's something, whether happy or sad, every athlete faces, that last competition, that last medal, the last hurrah, whether it's by choice, by injury, not being competitive. We all go through that. And I think it's tough and nothing can really prepare you for that, right? If it's something that you've done your whole life every day, and then all of a sudden you have to build a new way of living. And there's always this temporary period of just relief, I think, from the stress, the injuries, the pain, the criticism from the press. And then you start to miss it because you were tested and there was a lot that was expected of you. And, with great responsibility and scrutiny also comes great reward. So I think what did I learn about myself? I learned that I show up, I stick it out no matter how tough it is. I'm pretty good at showing up each day and dealing. I certainly think that I could have learned to be my friend in more situations. I'm very good at being the critic. And I think figure skating breeds a perfectionist mentality where you do a 4-minute program with 30 elements and it can go really well. But if you mess up one of them at the end of it, you're just like, how did I make a mistake there? Like, that's unacceptable. I need to fix it. I need to do it again. And that becomes the wormhole that you go down and you focus on, and it's, very different in life. And I spend a lot of time now looking at new technologies and the investment world. And if you look at just the failure rate of the average entrepreneur, or how many companies that are started go out of business, it's a completely different risk appetite where, 99% of companies don't succeed. And so many successful entrepreneurs now had serial failures before they had their big moment. And so I'm very curious at understanding how life experience and childhood forms your appetite for risk, the way you make decisions, how you view failure, if it's iteration, reiteration, how you learn. It's how you get experience. Whereas I think in a sport like gymnastics, like figure skating, that you're kind of steeped in from a very early age, it's like perfection. Perfection is demanded of you. If you make, a minor mistake, you have to live with that forever. That has consequences. The color of your medal changes. You get a spot on the Olympic team or you don't. And it's a tough way to see the world. It's a reality for those sports and many sports. And jumping, making that jump, that leap post-sport into the real world, there's a lot of relearning and unlearning that needs to happen.
And I want to talk to you about success and failure and how you thought about those things at a few different moments in your life. So in a minute, we'll get to sort of that post-Olympics, post-skating career moment of transition. But taking it back to the 2002 Olympics, do you remember how you felt right before you left home for 2002? Did you feel like you were just excited to go, or were you striving, you hadn't made it yet, you really wanted to be on the podium?
I think in my life, I generally have never been just excited. I've always had this weight of, responsibility and expectations that I place on myself. And so there was, tremendous nerves going in, but this was it for me. I had been counting down the days for the Salt Lake City Games since I watched the Nagano Games, and they tell you however many, 700 and blah, 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 this many days, more than that, to the next games. And so it was a big thing for me to make it, to get second, to make the team. And you don't even have time really to celebrate. There's a moment of, wow, I'm going to the Olympics. And then you're like, the Olympics is in 1 month. I need to prepare this and this and this and this. And my whole life is riding on this moment. So the celebration and excitement period is short. And then the pressure, I think, really starts building up. And but you don't fully internalize that this opportunity comes once every 4 years if you're lucky. And so much is about timing in terms of your skill, injury, other competitors. And so it's just this brief moment in time where you had a chance to prove something, do something, and the whole world is watching. So I think I definitely felt that weight, but also tremendous excitement to be competing in the U.S. at my first games and have family and friends in the stands.
And you went in as this rising star. You placed fourth. To anybody else watching, it's like, wow, she made it to the Olympics. She did such a beautiful job. She was so close to the podium. But to you, how did you feel going home?
I think just really it's heartbreak, and it's from a number of places. I think first and foremost from from myself. And it's because for years, you see this this Disney fairy tale ending, but it's not that you find your prince and get married. It's you go to the Olympics, you skate perfectly, and you get a gold medal. And that was the Disney fairy tale ending for, I think, every girl figure skating around the world as they were growing up. And so you train, you prepare, and then sometimes things just don't go as you want them to. And I remember that morning of the long program, I lost. They say, well, you lost when an element you can do easily, you just can't do. And you just don't feel where you are in the air. And it's you're a little confused and you're disoriented. And I just couldn't do it that day. And that's very unsettling, but you still have to show up, go in, and you know, go in believing as if you had had a perfect practice. And I ended up landing that jump in competition, but falling on the combination, the second jump. And, you know, then you just have this like deep sinking feeling in your body where you're like, there goes the shot at a medal and the podium and all these things that I'd worked for, but you can't get off the ice. You have another 3.5 minutes to go with everyone watching. And that's really hard to kind of pick yourself up and create this barrier, this armor between you and the world, and pull stuff out of yourself that's very hard to do while you're mentally not really examining, analyzing, letting what happened really sink in. Because you can't start thinking, oh, I missed that jump. That means I won't be on the podium. And like, this is what that means. So am I going to go to another Olympic Games? How could this happen? How do I feel? You can't do that. You have to shut all that thinking down and then keep going. And at the same time, the world's watching. So it's a lot for anyone, especially a teenager. And so I ended up, you know, having fun the last 2 days of the games, going to closing ceremonies, but leaving with this really like burning desire to be a better skater, to go back to the next Olympic Games, to rededicate myself for my next Olympic cycle.
Yep. And then you spent the next 4 years training. You dealt with some difficult injuries and you fought back and you went into 2006 as the favorite. You're just a few weeks away from what could be your life after skating. Had you thought about it by then? Or were you still just laser focused on that goal?
At the time that I was competing, there was a different formula than there is now. It was really about target an Olympic Games, win, and then tour and go have a glamorous life. And like you've checked the box, you've trained really hard, and you leave at the top and you move on. And I think since then, in many sports, it's become about longevity and becoming like the people's favorite and showing up. And like, I think Serena Williams is the epitome of this. You show up again and again, and you just continue to build your greatness and your brand. And you are a competitive athlete. You're not a competitor that won a gold medal and moved on. Like your whole way of living and being in the world is based on the fact that you compete and you continue to compete. And it's a way of life, not one goal that you will achieve and move on from. And so I think I still had that mentality going into the 2006 games, really wanting to win a gold medal and move on and go on to, you know, other interests and other things in my life, and to not live under that type of pressure and scrutiny. And so, yes, you know, it was very, very exciting, and it's very different coming in as a seasoned competitor, having been to an Olympic Games and having been a favorite as well for the U.S. And the attention and the spotlight. I think figure skating is one of the marquee events in the Olympic Games, and being a U.S. athlete, you know, you have all the media following you around and, you know, ruminating on like any little thing that you might have done or said and what it might mean, and if you might have a crush on another athlete. And it's a very buzzy, exciting, fun place to be, except that you're so preoccupied by your competition and your training and what's expected of you that there's a lot of inputs. And so I think because of that, you naturally have to develop skills to put up barriers and walls, to not let it all in, you know, to keep your focus, to keep your peace, to not let the media room into your like deep emotions. And you develop this wall, which, you know, then you spend the next part of your life trying to break down and learn to relate to people. But it's a definitely, you know, sports in general, and I think especially solo sports and sports like figure skating and gymnastics, you really have to learn to develop your armor to survive and to have that way of life and to live with that kind of pressure. And so again, I think as a student of psychology, I'm just fascinated by the human condition, the human experience, how the same thing can happen to two people and they see it and interpret it completely different based on like their life experiences. And so as we go through different chapters in our lives, I'm like always wondering like, oh, how did the first 20 years of my life really impact how I see the world today and my expectations today and the way that I relate to other people today. So I think, today it really serves as a foundation for who I am. And even as I've stepped away from the sport, coming back to really kind of reunite with the Olympic and Paralympic movement and committee and just be so excited about what these athletes are going through, which you can't really see at the time because you're looking at the world 2 inches away. Even if I don't skate, even if I haven't skated or competed since, I haven't competed since 2010, I haven't skated since, who knows, 2015, like that has shaped me more than anything in my life. And at such a formative time in my life that it really like behooves me to understand those inputs and go back to those experiences, which I think I shut out for a very, very long time because of obviously like the pain and the disappointment that they brought, because you can't retake it. It's not a course or an exam that you can redo and then graduate and get your diploma so all these things, they're always like kind of like floating around in my head.
Mm-hmm. And I want to talk about that sense of pressure that you were under going into the long program in 2006 and what your mindset was when you went out onto the ice that night, and then how you think about that moment today. So take me back there first, and let's talk about what was going through your mind during that long program.
It was a really tough day, a really tough 2 days. The short program, I believe, was on a Tuesday. Wednesday was off. Long program was on a Thursday. And Tuesday, I was on top of the world. I was first after the short program. It was such a relief. But there was a lot of underlying anxiety because I knew that I wasn't prepared. And I wasn't prepared because I was injured. And so I didn't even practice on Wednesday. And everyone's like, why didn't you practice? And I was at physical therapy 3 times that day. And so just knowing that you can't be out there preparing and you're going to have to try to pull a rabbit out of your sleeve is a really tough feeling. It's tough as it is, even if you feel prepared. And so I went into that performance just feeling really scared and feeling like I hoped I could pull a rabbit out of my hat like I had done with the short program. And I did not, right? I made a mistake. I made a second mistake. And ultimately that night was not a great night for anyone. And so I was lucky to end up on the podium and with a silver medal. But I think, starting when the music started, I felt kind of like this fear and apprehension, knowing that this was it. And again, like you have these different things going on. We're like, just stay in the moment, listen to the music. This is what you need to do. Oh my gosh, this element's coming up. I need to do it. At the same time, you're like, this is it. This moment that you thought would never come for 10 years is actually here. It's here. How is it here? What does that mean? Like everyone's watching me. My family's here. And all this is happening like in a split second while you're listening to the music. You're listening to like Go USA, Go Sasha. You're listening to Italian commentators or, announcements in the background. You like smell popcorn in the arena.
Oh my gosh.
Just like a million things are coming into your senses externally. The feeling of like the ice under your blades and like the musty smell of Zamboni. And then this realization that like a moment in time that was always on the horizon actually has come. So that was kind of my experience going in. And then I think falling on the first jump, falling on the second jump, again, it's like this kind of shock and horror, but no time for processing because you have to like brace yourself, pick yourself up, keep the audience out, and just like, it's like clinging on like a cat to the curtains. You're just like, gotta do this. And ultimately I came back, I found a rhythm and a focus, and I landed everything else throughout the rest of my program and ended up with a silver medal, stood on the podium, saw the US flag. But it was, just years and years of like later what I continue to process like that night and all the things that have gone into it. But, I think it's still very far away from being processed.
And you are known for bringing so much emotion to your skating, and the rest of that program is stunning. And the choreography was stunning in the first place, but the rest of that, I just feel like watching it, we feel it with you, and the music is so beautiful too. I think that's also part of it, where it's just like it pulls at your heartstrings. Do you feel like you channeled your emotion into the rest of that skate?
Definitely. And I think the more that you go through a program, the nerves dissipate, you are more embodied and grounded. You start to hear the music. It's especially in a sport like figure skating, which I say is like on this edge between sport and art. It's like gymnastics, figure skating, and then there's a line, and then it's like ballet and dance, and like that's the arts, and figure skating and gymnastics are a sport. But this having a deep connection to music, and I think many people will understand this, because I think for so many people, like, music makes our lives like worth living. It changes our mood, it changes everything, and it's whether it's like the song that you fell in love to, or whatever it is. And so for me, I kind of tapped into this music that was very meaningful for me, and I think I was able to let the sport part go a little bit, because, I'd already fallen on 2 jumps, and it wasn't like, don't make a mistake, don't make a mistake, don't make a mistake. I mean, that was still certainly in my mind, but it was like that gold medal, that chance had evaporated. And so now it was like I just threw myself into the performance and the art aspect of it. And so I think it was meaningful, because it's like knowing that something was coming to an end, like this chapter. And so I think I was able to really shift mindset and space to see it from far away, be literally like in the music. And, it's almost like someone knowing that they're going to retire, and like, it wasn't about like that competition and that moment and the technical demands. It was about a way of life coming to an end, and a relationship with the audience and the judges, and like kind of paying homage to like that decade and that career and that way of life.
Well, it's one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen at the Olympics. And it's crazy to me that it's just, it was a moment of disappointment, because it was so incredible. And I can't imagine that kind of pressure, and the ability to switch mindsets so quickly and turn it into this beautiful goodbye almost to that skating career is just really amazing, and really cool to hear you talking about it. Thank you. How did you start to rethink what a successful life meant to you? What were sort of your first steps toward, now that I'm not working towards this goal, I'm going to work towards something else?
I think I was under the illusion that after college, you have it all figured out. So I was like, great, I'm going to go to school. And once I go to school, the answer will just be there with my diploma. They just come together. They just got to get spit out at the end of this sausage making machine. And I graduated, and that realization never came. And so there was, and it didn't really even come in undergrad. I was fortunate to go to an incredible liberal arts institution, to general studies at Columbia. And I was a political science major, but I took philosophy and poetry, and, I spent time in the arts and drawing and painting. And so it was this incredible and also very privileged time in my life to explore for the sake of exploring, learn for the sake of learning, without achievement tied to it, and without identity and worth tied to what I was doing. And I think that's a very beautiful way to live, and to have the opportunity to do that. Mm-hmm. But, as soon as you graduate, then you're like, okay, well, what are you going to do? And what are you going to be good at? And what is the world going to recognize you for? And I think after 2 decades of being an athlete, you get used to an athlete that's gone to the Olympics, you get used to being scrutinized, doing something you feel is worth doing, something that also happens to be in the spotlight and in the public arena. And so then those are all factors that you begin to weigh every choice against. And ultimately, you find that that's kind of this hollow facade, or it's like a shadow. It's a shadow that follows an original intention, but that original impetus has to come from someplace genuine. Because if you're just trying to make a shadow, you can't make a shadow. You have to like be a physical object, and then you can make a shadow. And so I think a lot of the last decade has been about exploring other things that I'm interested in. And I'm very fascinated by the investing world. I am very much in awe of entrepreneurs, their ability to go way out on the risk spectrum and risk everything with this passion and have this type of work ethic to try to birth something into this world. And so I find that I spend a lot of time understanding markets, investing, trying to get closer to entrepreneurs and their journeys, and just have a greatest respect and a lot that I can learn from them. So I think in my post-skating chapter, I really gravitate towards people who have built something in their own way, whether that's someone like, Esther Perel, who's built this amazing identity around relationships and a podcast and a book around that, and helping humans relate and where our kind of biases come from, to, a founder of, an amazing company that created a sector that no one thought anyone needed. And they had a vision, and they failed 3 times, and they were living in their mother's basement. And then I just think it's incredible to have that kind of belief and determination when no one else sees it. So I'd say those are kind of things that inspire me today and where my interests are. And I still constantly struggle with that kind of shadow and actual self in terms of who am I and what do I want the world to actually see and project back to me. And, I don't remember who said, but I think a sociologist in the 19th century, something Cooley, said that, like, I'm not what I think I am. I'm not what you think I am. I am what I think you think I am. And so as social creatures, we're just constantly like pushing something out to have it reflected back. And we want to just see how we're seen. And I think I admire people that are able to not have that drive their daily decisions, but that they can just see what they want to see and block out the noise. And I think that's a very important skill to have these days. But again, I think just so much more to understand in human psychology and why we make decisions.
Do you think that you are better at blocking out the noise because of your Olympic career, or do you think that that's something that's been a big struggle for you?
I think having an Olympic career in the spotlight normalizes you doing something that gets attention in the public eye. And most people's lives are not in the public eye, whether they're incredible academics or professors, or, they've discovered something and ultimately they get a Nobel Prize. I mean, they've probably spent 50 years in obscurity, and then they invented something, and then the whole world wakes up, you're amazing, you're incredible, and then they forget about you, and then they move on to the next Olympic champion, the next Nobel laureate. And so that, I think, is something that's hard to untangle from an identity that is created as a child. I think it's different if maybe you first get attention at the age of 50 or 60 because you've just established all your relationships and way of being in the world before that ever happened. And so I'm very aware of it and, aware of the need to disentangle that. And I think that kind of ties back to where we started, of this feeling of ease and rightness when I'm in this kind of Buddhist world, when I'm dismantling, letting the ego dissipate, and why am I doing something? What is actually authentic? What am I doing to prove to someone else? And what do I actually enjoy? And so I think it's a work in progress. But I definitely know that it's the horse has to come before the cart. And so what was amazing about skating was I just didn't care what anyone was thinking. I loved it. I needed to get better at it. And that drove me. And then all these things followed. And I'm in, I think, a chapter where I'm getting to explore many, many things. And I'm still finding my horse, and finding the vehicle to really to learn and develop and blossom outside of athletics.
Do you think that you'd be on the same spiritual path today if you had won the gold in 2006?
It's so funny because I always thought like, oh, if I had just won everything and I never made a mistake, then I wouldn't have any problems. It would be great. And then working with Michael Phelps on the documentary, The Weight of Gold, you won everything and you still have, how do you still have problems?
Right.
24, 5 Olympic medals. And there, I think you can parse that out into two things. And it's like, one is like understanding yourself and why you physically or mentally didn't do what you wanted to do in the moment it counted. And then just the loss of identity of moving on from that moment, no matter what happened. Even if you won, you're no longer getting up and going to the rink every day. There's a new Olympic champion. There are the Oscars and elections and everything else happening in the world, and the next YouTube star, and you've faded. And so who are you now? And I think no matter what, you can't really avoid that question of like, who are you now? What will the next 60 years of your life be? And so I think there's certainly an aspect of not winning, but I think that's a smaller part than the desire to have the clarity of identity and purpose that a sport once provided.
And you're a mom now. What does a meaningful life look like to you moving forward? And how do you want to teach your kids, this is what a meaningful life looks like?
Sure, good questions. I think at first you're just trying to sleep, and then you're just trying to get ahead of the diapers, and then no one's drawing the wall, which happens a lot, a lot more than I'd like. But I think as my oldest is about to turn 3, he's curious, he's smart, he's asking questions, he's testing me. He's learning to deal with his own emotions and frustrations, which, makes me, I have to reflect how I deal with my own emotions and what makes me frustrated. And I'm seeing this next era, this next chapter as a very important time to teach my kids, develop my kids, be there to listen, and also have them teach me because they are seeing things with fresh eyes. And I'm somewhat programmed. And so I don't see things. I don't see the possibility in things. I see them one way as I have been trained to see them many, many, many times over the last, 38 years. And they are not trained yet in how they see things. So it's always a question and a possibility. And so that's a gift to me if I can have the patience to engage on that level. And, it's also, I think, the greatest task to shape another human. And I think having stepped into the role of mother, you kind of realize that there's nothing more important and that it's just this whole kind of hidden trap door that you just fall into that you have no idea exists and you see moms at work and they've got mom responsibilities in life and everything else. And you're just like, oh yeah, they're busy. They're moms. Like a lot of moms. You just do it. And then you step into that role and you're like, this is unbelievable. Like trying to keep 2 little children alive, trying to develop a career, trying to teach them about the world, re-examine the world myself. And so it's a beautiful, tumultuous place to be with a lot of demands. But I suppose it kind of puts you right at the essence, right at the heart of life.
Mm-hmm. And I want to hear your take on achievement versus happiness. You mentioned that you've always been wired for achievement. Now, do you feel like you're striving for both? Do you feel like you've shifted your balance a little bit? How do you think about those two things today and moving forward?
I think I've reframed happiness as peace or contentment. Like when you're in a place where you just take absolute delight in a cup of tea, that you can sit in a chair and feel just at ease. and look out the window without this internal metronome that's driving you to like, you didn't get this done, and this wasn't good enough, and this is like this kind of go, 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 never enough. And so these moments that I find with just absolute satisfaction and contentment in the world, I define that now as happiness. And I think that the answer is it's not happiness or achievement, because I think for me and for many people, achievement taps into happiness. When you feel like you are achieving, you are doing things that are hard and you're getting better, that the byproduct of that is this deep contentment with how you're choosing to live. Where alternatively, when you do things that in short bursts make you happy, that are easy, like, eating a cupcake or watching your favorite TV show, it doesn't give you this like long lasting feeling, like when you've spent 8 hours hiking to the top of the mountain and you just have this deep sense of satisfaction and happiness, that's very different than like short-term gratification, which I think parenthood is probably in that same category of difficult but rewarding. So I think they're very interrelated, and each, the achievement needs a healthy check so that it doesn't, because it can be like a weed and just grow out of control and kill everything else. But there should be like a symbiosis between some type of achievement where you feel like you're pushing yourself and on a path, and that ties into your deeper sense of contentment with how you're choosing to live and be in the world.
Amazing. Well, Sasha, this has been an incredible conversation. Thank you so much. I think you have such an interesting perspective. You've lived so many people's pipe dream. So many people watch the Olympics and they're like, oh, if only I could do that. And I think you are so reflective and open and willing to share that it's not exactly what people might expect. And we're all on our own journey. And I really appreciate you sharing everything. Thank you.
Thank you. I always really appreciate the opportunity to have these kind of conversations. I think these days the opportunities are rare, and I wish there were more opportunities for people to get together and connect on this deeper level, because there's nothing more gratifying than connecting at a deeper level.
Agreed. Well, I want to get into our lightning round of fun questions. And to start out, we've talked a lot today about your adjustment to a life after skating. I want to hear if there's any sort of small, weird surprises after you stopped skating and you started trying to adjust to a different type of lifestyle. Was there anything that you're like, wow, I have so much time. I have time for this now, or anything that was sort of a culture shock adjusting to a different lifestyle?
I think the world of, bureaucracy and email, and as an athlete, everything is directed towards your physical achievement and improving that. And so when I graduated and applied to different colleges, it's like, you need these 5 applications and these 4 test scores, and then you have to fill out these 11 things. And it's just like, wow, so much time is wasted just explaining things and like jumping through hoops. And so I think that's something I'm still learning to be a better bureaucrat, but it's not my natural strength.
Yeah, that's definitely an adjustment. I want to know about the song Romeo and Juliet. I have always loved that song. And when you skated to that, I've been a trumpet player my whole life. And I loved watching you skate to that song so much that my trumpet teacher wrote an arrangement for me to be able to play that song on my trumpet. So I just loved it, and I wanted to thank you for that. But also to hear if you still love that song, is it still something that you love to listen to?
So that's a little bit of maybe a loaded question, but no, that theme from the Romeo and Juliet film, I think Prokofiev composed that version of Romeo and Juliet, and it's just sweeping, I feel like, is the way to describe it. Like, it moves into your body and grabs it, and it takes you over. It's like it is, in a way, it's a religious experience, and I think that's why music is so often tied to the church and to ceremony and to ritual, because music is such certain types of music can really just change how you feel. And Romeo and Juliet is certainly one of those. And that's why when I heard it, I knew I needed to skate to it. And, after this, I will definitely listen to it again. But I think, I've definitely compartmentalized like pieces of my life and skating music that's associated, because it's a lot more than a piece of music now. It's time travel.
Right. What songs do you love to listen to today?
I am overly obsessed with the Lumineers.
Love. Such a good one.
Love the Lumineers. They are my favorite. I love that kind of folk something that kind of grabs at your heartstrings. It's got that kind of melody to it, but hands down Lumineers.
And you were in New York City before the pandemic, and you've been in Colorado for the last couple of years. What is something you miss about New York City and something you love about Colorado?
I miss the vibrancy of New York, walking down the street. Just everything is possible. Everyone is exploring something. Everyone's excited. Everyone is hustling. And that's a very inspiring, can be a very inspiring environment to live in. And in terms of what I love about Colorado, just the space and the peace. The mountains, the rivers, it is physically gorgeous here. And there is no traffic noise, and you are in the great outdoors. You are developing a relationship with nature, which also means more of a relationship sometimes with yourself, because you can't tap into the frenetic noise of culture and people constantly buzzing around doing something. So there's a lot more space to sit within.
What's one thing in your home that brings you comfort or joy?
My eye mask. I don't sleep without an eye mask now, so I need 100% pitch black. That's definitely a creature comfort that's kept in there.
Great one. What's one thing in your home that makes your life easier?
Instant hot water. I make 12 cups of tea a day, and so the instant hot water is instant gratification for me.
What's your household pet peeve?
Mess. I feel like no matter how much I'm like cleaning and organizing, it's just, I'm like Sisyphus. It's like the stone just keeps rolling back. Not even like every day, but like 5 times a day with kids and nap time and just.
What's one trait or piece of wisdom that you want to pass on to your kids?
I would say I guess it's like a combination, like both to learn, which I think are kind of related, but to learn patience, and to see the best in everyone.
2 really good ones. Who's someone you admire who you think lives well?
It's funny. I would say it's funny. My husband comes to mind because he deals with a lot of stress, a lot of responsibility, and does not have much free time. But I think his ability to be very social, very positively engaged in the world, and to see the best in everyone, I really admire, considering like how much he has to juggle. So I would say my husband.
And what inspires you to live better?
I think my kids, when you have 2 little, or however many you have, but just like this wondrous little being kind of looking at you, dependent on you, you have this different role in the world where, someone depends on you. They think the world of you, and you have to kind of guide and shape them, and, tremendous responsibility, but it forces you to move into another chapter of maturity and development of how you are as a caregiver, how you are as a leader, how you are as someone that inspires and cares, versus like thinking of just yourself. It shifts the focus of what you're thinking about.
Well, Sasha, thank you so much. This has been such a meaningful conversation, and I appreciate you having us into your home.
Absolutely. Thank you for coming. Visitors always welcome. And I appreciate it. I had a great time as well.
Thank you to Sasha Cohen for welcoming us today. Follow along with Sasha on Instagram at Sasha Cohen NYC, and hear more of her story in The Weight of Gold on HBO. I'm Kristen Twyford, and if you enjoyed our conversation, I hope you'll subscribe to Make Yourself at Home and leave us a review. Make Yourself at Home is presented by Nines, household management software that helps you manage your properties and everything that comes with them, so you can make the most of your time at home. Learn more at ninesliving.com.